I've been playing outdoors since I was a kid, standing by the front door at around 2 years old, hollering, side, 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 trying to get my mom to let me go play outside. Now, after 30 plus years working in the outdoor business, I'm dropping insider conversations every week with the brand leaders, guides, marketers, CEOs, and others to make the outdoor industry a trillion-dollar juggernaut that drives product innovation, revenue, and public policy for everything outdoors. I'm Rick Sayes. Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to episode 441 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Today I'm talking with travel writer Jessica Poitevien. Jessica says that storytelling has always been her passion. Whether she's reviewing a new hotel, diving deep into some little-known destination, or helping a travel brand tell their story, she does it all with the hopes of inspiring others to explore this beautiful world. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to talk with you. I love talking with travelers. You're on the go a lot, and I'm sure you've been to all kinds of great spots, so we'll talk a little about that. And you just mentioned, before we hit the record button, you're on your way to Australia. That'll be fun.
I am very excited. It will be my first time there, and I'm ready to cross off that continent.
Yeah, very good. That's a tough one. That's still on the only continent on my list. I got to knock that off somehow. I'll get to it. So let's begin with how you got interested in travel. Was there a trip that inspired you or something that kind of just put the wheels in motion?
It's probably a combination of a few things. When I was a kid, my family moved around a lot. So we were in New York and then Florida, back to New York, and eventually California, and now back to Florida. So I think even just seeing, traveling through that perspective of actually moving to these different places started to pique my interest, because each of those states are very different from one another.
Yeah.
But probably what really solidified my love of travel was a trip that I did 10th grade in high school. My Spanish teacher organized a spring break visit to Spain for our class.
Wow.
And so we spent the week there, taking Spanish classes, living with host families. And I think that really, I was already starting to be interested in travel and also learning Spanish. And that trip definitely sealed the deal, I would
bet
say.
that was fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was super fun.
I got to get over there. I have a lot of Spanish blood in my heritage, so I've been there once, but I got to go back. I think we have family over there somewhere. But yeah, so it's a great country. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I loved my time there.
And the food, right? The food's great too.
Food. Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty true of everywhere, though. I think everywhere you go, the food is just because it's different. It's just, I don't know. I eat more than I should, but
I'm going to London soon, and that's the one destination I hear people complain about the food very often. But I have a feeling that if you look hard enough in any place, you could find good cuisine. So I'm not too concerned.
No, I've been to London. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. They do have their basics, which are pretty basic, but there's some good stuff there. Yeah, you'll find something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And share a bit about your journey to becoming a writer. How'd that happen?
I took a pretty winding road, I would say, to becoming a writer. I knew I wanted to be a writer for a very long time, ever since middle school, I would say. But by the time I got into college and I was studying journalism, working on the college newspaper, doing all of the things that, you're supposed to do, it was also around the time that, the internet was really causing a lot of waves in the world of journalism. And people were really afraid that the internet was going to kill journalism. Newspapers were going to shut down. They weren't going to, lay off left and right. And, even my journalism professors were kind of doom and gloom sort of attitude about writing. Yeah. So I said, maybe I need to find a different career, because nobody seems to think this is a good idea. And so I actually switched my major to linguistics. I got certified in teaching English as a second language. And after graduation, I spent 2 years in Spain teaching English. And I saw that skill of teaching English as a second language as a way to, not only help other people, but also still be able to see the world. And so while I was in Spain, I was doing with that same mindset of wanting to help people see the world. I started a travel blog. I still loved writing, so I wanted to keep up with that somehow. And so I started with travel blogging, and, I did that for a few years, got a little bit burnt out, came back to the US, and, felt a little bit lost for some time. And it was, I would say, a little bit of fate that I met someone at the University of Miami, where I was working at the time, who connected me with a travel agent magazine here in South Florida.
Oh,
And because of my blog, and also because of, the experience that I had in college, I actually, in that gap where I was trying to figure out what to do, I wrote an article, my first freelance piece for National Geographic, and which was also, they found me through my blog. I really give a lot of credit to
wow.
I give a lot of credit to that blog, even
That's
though
huge. Yeah.
it's defunct now, but it definitely
It served
it
its
helped
purpose.
launch. It served its purpose, yes. And so, with those two things kind of really bolstering my portfolio, you could say, I got that job at that travel agent magazine, and that is when I really started to open my eyes to the possibilities of writing, and specifically in the travel sphere. And so I did that for a couple years, eventually moved to Colombia, where my husband was living. And so I decided, it's time to go freelance. And
Yeah.
I started freelancing at the beginning of the pandemic, which wasn't exactly a great time for travel,
Well,
but
it either was great or not great. I mean, the good news
yeah,
was it wasn't crowded.
yes, exactly. But I
Interesting.
think it forced me to kind of sit down and think about a different route, because I
Hmm.
didn't
Hmm.
particularly like working at full time at a magazine. It was more
Hmm.
restrictive than I thought working at a travel magazine would be. I thought I'd be hopping
Right.
all over the place, but no, they need you in the office to actually run the magazine.
Wow.
So, it gave me the time to kind of think about how to approach freelancing and dip my toes in slowly. And now I've been doing it full time for since 2020.
Wow. Good for you. And so your blog inspired the writing. Do you also take the photographs that go with your articles, or how does that work?
So when I was blogging, yes, that was
Hmm.
definitely all my photographs. At the time, I don't even think I had an iPhone. It was very, I think I had still old school. Well, not that old school, but digital cameras.
Right.
It feels very old school now.
Now it does. Yeah.
um, but nowadays, it honestly depends. Sometimes when I write stories that are based on my, heavily based on my personal experiences, sometimes the editors will ask for some photos, and these smartphones take such great quality photos.
It's
It's
amazing.
good
Yeah.
enough for publication. Other
Yeah.
times I work with the PR firms that are maybe organizing the trips. They help me get some really high quality photos, things like that. Sometimes I
Hmm.
travel with photographers. So it
Hmm.
depends on the story.
Very cool. That's good. What do you think sets apart exceptional travel writing from not exceptional travel writing, boring travel writing?
Mhm. There's probably a few things. I think each story has to know kind of what its purpose is,
Hmm.
right? There are some stories that are purely for storytelling. And then
Hmm.
there are other pieces that are, that we call service journalism, that they are there to help the reader solve a problem.
Mm.
And I think for me, really good story travel writing, even though there are those two separate categories, they often weave in a little bit of each within it.
Hmm.
If I'm telling a great travel story, you're still going to be able to get some information from it that's going
Hmm.
to help you plan that trip eventually.
Right.
I
That's
think
good.
I think also really good travel writing, it infuses a very strong sense of place,
Mm.
and very specifically so. That's
Hmm.
something that I, even on my own journey of improving my travel writing and improve my writing as in general, thinking what are those tiny details that make one place different from another.
Hmm.
If I'm saying that I'm in a forest, in XYZ country, well, what kind of forest is it? What kind of trees are here? What kind of flowers? Because, you know, a rainforest in Costa Rica is obviously going to be different than a forest in the mountains of Turkey or
Right,
something,
right.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's true. Yeah, yeah.
So building up and the imagery of a place with very specific details.
Hmm.
And I think also knowing your limitations as a travel writer,
Hmm.
because I cannot possibly be an expert on a destination that I've only spent a week in,
Pretty
and I
tough.
think
Yeah,
it's tough.
yeah.
And so that doesn't mean that I can't write about that destination, but it also means knowing the angle that I present it with, and also knowing when to bring in the voices of local people who are
Mm-hmm.
the true experts
Hmm.
in that destination. So those are the few of the things I would say.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think with the rise of social media and influencer culture, how do you maintain that authenticity and credibility? Because there's a lot of folks these days that just, fly all around or travel all around and snap photos and write little articles, but I don't
Hmm.
think they do the deep dive like some of you travel writers do. You really get down,
Hmm.
like you say, with the locals and with the descriptions of the what type
Hmm.
of flowers are. You got to learn a lot before you can write a really tight article, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in some ways I consider myself as a little bit of both. I do a
I can
lot
see
of
that.
posting on social media and sharing information from my travels, because sometimes, especially as a freelancer, I don't get to write about all of my trips.
Hmm.
So, having that outlet of social media allows me to share my knowledge and my experiences in a different way.
Hmm.
But I think part of it is when I started my blog, I always had the catchphrase, I guess you can say, or my motto was personal but informative. I
Mm.
never wanted my blog post, and to this day, I never want my stories to feel like a journey. I'm sorry, a diary, like a diary entry
Hmm.
that nobody but my mom would probably want to read. I want it to have that element of storytelling, but also be informative for the reader.
Hmm.
And I think that when it comes to, you know what, you mind if I start that over? I had an idea in my head and I just
That's
like
fine.
totally
Yeah.
lost it.
Yeah. You want me to ask the question again?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, with the rise of social media and influencer culture, how do you maintain authenticity? I can't even say the question. With the rise of social media and influencer culture, how do you maintain authenticity and credibility in your writing? There's a lot of folks that do a lot of writing and just throw it up there for social media. It's not as detailed. I get that. It doesn't need to be, but you guys that
Mhm.
write those beautiful articles are just you just put me right in the place. It's just so descriptive.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I like to dabble in both worlds of social media and influencing and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
as well as writing, because I think it gives me a more ample opportunity to share my knowledge and share my experiences that perhaps don't fit well in the publication,
Hmm.
field.
Yep.
It's a little bit different style, obviously.
Yep.
I think the way I approach authenticity in my writing is the same way that I personally approach authenticity even in social media as well, which is to make everything I share personal,
Mm,
but also informative.
that
And
makes
I've
sense.
had that motto since my blogging days.
Hmm.
I want everything to serve a purpose,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I think being honest obviously is probably the biggest one.
Right.
I think also understanding when how to assess an experience from someone else's perspective. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. I remember I went on a press trip once and I was on an assignment to write about this resort.
Hmm.
And I honestly did not really like the resort that much.
Oh wow, interesting.
it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't it wasn't my style of vacation. And I've been to other resorts that I love, but for some reason this one in particular I wasn't really feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I met a bunch of people there who absolutely loved the resort. And they were repeat visitors. And they just, they were just raving and raving about how much they love the resort. And I got a great piece of advice from another writer on the trip is that sometimes you have to think, who is this experience for?
Good one.
Maybe I am not the target audience for this experience. And that could go for so many different things.
Sure. For all of us, yeah.
Maybe I'm not the target audience, but perhaps, maybe this is more for families. Maybe this is more for younger people, older people, all sorts of things. And, being able to think kind of objectively and also present that in my writing, in social media, in whatever, piece of media that I'm creating, I think that also helps a lot in maintaining that authenticity and credibility, because I can say, and sometimes I don't even necessarily need to say this wasn't for me, but if you fit into such and such category, it's just more about letting them know who this is for.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the things I try to keep in mind. And I have curated my social media feed and who I follow to make sure that I am only following influencers who follow that same kind of motto, let's say, where they are doing more than just pretty photos and pretty places. They're telling me the truth behind those photos. They're telling me the truth of their experiences and kind of not afraid to show the good and the bad side of traveling. So I think you can find that authenticity on social media as well. It might be a little bit harder to pick through, but it is out there.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think we're going to social media for that, because it's kind of like sound bites. And, not only is the social media influencer or writer doing it on the fly, we're doing it on the fly too. Like we're just flipping through our phone or whatever. So yeah, it's very much quickly. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense though. I like your explanation for that. And how do you balance the need to provide practical travel advice along with storytelling and personal experiences? Do you do that a lot, or that's?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. It definitely depends on the style of the story, right? Because there are some stories that are very explicitly for the purpose of solving an issue. I remember I've written stories about, how to stay comfortable on a long haul flight, or, good sunscreen for the summer, for the summertime, things like that. Yeah. Where I might start the article, based off of some of my personal experiences, and then go into, here's the expert advice from people that I've interviewed, and, boom, 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 almost, listing, here's the things you need to know.
Right.
But even with a story that is kind of a more traditional story, what we consider when we think of a story, a beginning, middle, end, not explicitly for the purpose of giving advice, even with those, there's still a way to weave in key details about the experience that will make it relevant to someone else.
Yeah.
So, an example of that, I wrote a story once about taking my mom on her first cruise, because she was very, 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 very afraid of cruises before we went on this cruise. And so, the story was about, essentially taking my cruise phobic mom on her first sailing.
I bet that's a good story.
It was fun. It was definitely one of my favorites to write, and also to experience with my mom.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And so even though the story was about her and her experiences throughout the article, I'm also weaving in facts about that particular, because it was a new-ish ship that we were on. I'm also weaving in facts about the experience on that ship. So someone else who maybe their mom or themselves are not afraid of cruises,
right,
but they can still read that and say, oh, okay, if I go on this ship, this is what I can expect of the food. This is what I can expect, from the ambiance, from the nightlife, from, what kind of activities they have on board and the excursions, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's through the lens of that experience with my mom, but it still has a wider application for people who are just curious about that cruise ship.
Yeah, it's going to appeal to a broader audience who just may be curious about cruise ships, not necessarily cruising with their parent or something. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
And do you get a lot of direction from the magazines or the editors before you go?
It depends, because there are times where I go on a trip and I pitch the story idea to the editor and I tell them, this is what I experienced. This is, the story angle that I see that could work for here. Like, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And there are other times where an editor already has an idea of the story that they want to be written, and they just need someone to go out and do it. So it kind of depends. I find that editors tend to be flexible when it comes to stories that involve actually traveling. Because obviously, even as a travel writer, not every story I write involves actually going somewhere.
Right.
But when I mean, those are my favorite ones, but
of course,
they don't all involve that.
Yeah.
They tend to be more flexible though when it requires, traveling somewhere, just because they know that you might think a trip is going to go one way and then you get there and it's something else.
Exactly.
So they don't want to pigeonhole you too much into a particular idea and then, and then it just goes left.
You can't do that because things just blew up in your face. Yeah. We've all been on those trips, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Are there a couple of your favorite destinations that you've written about and why they might be your favorites? Or do you have one favorite that's you'd love to go back to?
That's a good question. I really, really love Turkey. I went there on my honeymoon, and then I went back on a press trip, partially because I loved it so much on my honeymoon. I said, let me go back again on an official work trip so I can go and see even more. I think Turkey is one of those countries that has a little bit of everything.
The great country.
It's, the landscape is gorgeous. You have the beautiful beaches on one side, you have the mountains on another, you have Cappadocia, which just feels like another planet. And then there's so much history there too.
Yeah.
The food is amazing. That definitely is a destination I rate high for for the food.
The people are great. Yeah.
The people are great. Yeah, it's very kind. I'm also a big cat person despite being allergic to them. So I enjoyed, all the cats that are around Istanbul just hanging out.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say that Turkey is definitely one of my favorite destinations.
I would agree with you. I have a great photo of a cat sleeping on a stoop actually, I think there was a guy sleeping on the stoop and the cat is just kind of sitting there next to him. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Turkey's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to see how the people really take care of the cats too. Even though they're technically street cats, but it seems like everybody unofficially adopts them.
Yeah, you see them put food out and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Exactly.
And how do you find clients? Do you have a destination that you're going for first, or just people find you? How does that happen?
A little bit of both. There are times where I have, especially now that I've been doing this for several years, I have PR people who reach out to me, telling me the updates about their destinations, anything kind of new and noteworthy that I could potentially turn into a story. Sometimes, with an invitation attached, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I kind of get the information from PR people, from my own research, and then I take that and I go to editors with my ideas. And then there are times where editors reach out to me because I've written quite a lot about Florida, for example. I will, where I currently live, I have a lot of editors who will reach out to me and say, hey, I'm looking for someone to write XYZ story about Florida. Can you do it? Yeah. So I have a little bit of, me reaching out to them reaching out to me kind of based on my expertise or other things that they've seen me writing. When it comes to corporate clients, because sometimes, you might notice that a certain airline or hotel has a blog. Somebody has to write those. And sometimes, sometimes I do that kind of work, and I've found LinkedIn to be very helpful for finding
Interesting.
those kind of clients.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's kind of even Twitter sometimes I find jobs on Twitter. If you
Mm-hmm.
follow the right editors and writers, they're usually sharing opportunities and
Cool.
so or I should say X, I forgot.
X, that's right. I call it Twitter all the time too. I
Yeah.
think everybody does. Yeah. It's kind of a silly thing. Yeah. Hey, would you kayak more if your boat fit easily in the trunk of your car or the back of your car? No roof rack needed? No, seriously. I'm guessing you'll paddle more if you don't have to go through the process. You know, move the car, get the ladder, remove the kayak from the racks in the garage, put the racks on the car, load the kayak, then do it all over again when you get to the water. Get the step stool, unload the kayak. You know the drill. Oru Kayaks to the rescue. They have transformed the way we connect to the outdoors. Oru kayaks are lightweight and incredibly strong. They fold down to fit in most cars. Oru's innovative origami-inspired living hinge lets you assemble them in about 1 minute, and they're designed for versatility, able to handle calm lakes, rivers with mild currents, and even coastal waters with ease. And Oru is offering Outdoor Biz listeners a great deal. Go to orukayak.com and use code ODBIZORU15, that's ODBIZORU15, and get 15% off your new kayak today. That's ODBIZORU15, and that code is good until July 31st. Get on it. Then send us pictures of your first adventure. Now let's get back to the show. So, what does a typical day look like for you when you're traveling? Or is there a typical day?
Yeah, I would say when I'm traveling, it depends on what type of trip it is and who is hosting the trip.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, if it is a tourism board, for example, they want me to see as much of the destination as possible. So usually those trips are very busy. They'll have activities and tours and, tour this hotel, maybe touring multiple hotels a day just to, give you a lay of the land kind of thing. So if it's a tourism board, those trips tend to be busier, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it is a particular hotel or a cruise ship, they just want you to have a good time and experience.
Yeah.
And experience it as similarly to a regular, let's say in air quotes, a regular passenger or guest.
Well, the better time you're having, the better article you're going to write, probably.
Exactly. So,
like anything else.
Exactly. So those tend to be kind of a more relaxed kind of trip. But regardless of what kind of trip it is, my typical day when I'm traveling typically starts with waking up earlier than I would like to so that I can do emails, catch up on assignments, catch up on whatever projects I'm working on before the official activities of the day start.
Gotcha.
And then after the whole long day of activities, or maybe relaxing by the pool, experiencing the hotel, then I'm usually staying up very late at night to also finish whatever assignments and catch up on any emails that came in through the day. So
wow.
My friends and family, they now understand not to call my work trips a vacation, especially the ones who I've been able to bring with me on my trips.
Right.
They realize, wow, you actually work a lot while you're traveling. I said, yes,
squeeze it all in. Yeah.
I got to squeeze it in somehow.
Yeah. So is there a difference? Can you find, you can create time to, sit down and focus and write while you're traveling? It's got to be challenging.
It is definitely, it's definitely challenging. I kind of, it's just one of those things I have to force myself to sit down and just do it. You can't, I think in general, even when I'm home, I can't always wait for the perfect sentence to just pop into my brain before I decide to sit down and start writing. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of word vomit before you can clean it up and make it nice and just get something onto the page. So I usually at some point just force myself to sit down and write, or I will walk in circles around my hotel room until something comes to mind.
Inspiration hits you. Yeah. That's
I
funny.
find that moving kind of helps me a little bit. If the
Interesting.
sitting is not working, the sitting and staring at the page is not working, then I just walk in circles or take a shower because then
Yeah,
I
it
have
gets the energy going. Yeah, that makes
no, it
sense.
gets the energy going, no distractions, can't have
Yeah.
my phone in the shower to distract me. So
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense.
get
Yeah.
good ideas in there.
Yeah. And you're also connected with the Adventure Travel Trade Association. How did you connect with those guys?
Well, I connected with them through a colleague of mine. Her name is Amanda Castleman. She is an excellent writer,
Hmm.
and also we co-teach classes on pitching and travel writing. So
Oh, cool.
helping other people who want to learn how to travel write, how to get into travel writing, and also help people who want to overcome that hurdle of how to pitch an editor. That was my biggest hurdle when
Yeah, I
I
bet.
first started, and Amanda helped me with that as well. So yeah, she recommended me for ATTA. I applied for one of their events, and I had such a great time
Hmm.
that I keep going back as much as they will have me. I am there as as
That's a
much as
good group. Yeah.
possible. It's a great group of people. The destinations are always so interesting, and truly just it's really about the people
Yeah.
that I meet on those trips. They're always so fascinating. I feel like I learned something new, not only about the destination that I'm in, but about the travel industry, about the outdoor industry,
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
just so many things, and such a genuinely welcoming group of people. So
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Good for you. And I think I read on your website or somewhere that you do a little unofficial travel agent work for friends. I'll bet that can be pretty interesting at times. There must be a story in there somewhere, or a few stories maybe.
A few stories for sure. I
There's a
It's
book
funny.
probably in that.
I definitely need to start collecting the stories so I don't forget for my future book one day. But I I always tell my friends and my family, I have the same internet that you have. I don't have a special corner that only
Right.
travel writers can access, but still
Right.
they come to me for the advice, and I'm happy to give it. I like it,
Yeah.
it kind of works a different side of my brain to plan the logistics of a trip.
Hmm.
But probably the best trip I planned was for my family. It was my parents' first time in Europe. We were going to
Wow.
visit
Cool.
my little sister who was studying in Italy at the time, and I had my own agenda of wanting to go to Croatia to go
Interesting.
sailing with my best friend, and so I had to kind of combine it all, planning the trip for me and my friend, planning the trip for my family, convincing them. At first my mom said Croatia for my first trip to Europe. Why am I gonna,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not one of the quote unquote,
It's not one of the
she's
big
thinking
four
Paris.
countries.
It's
Right.
not
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. But I knew how to cater to everyone's interest. I told my dad that in Croatia they filmed Game of Thrones. And then I told my
No.
mom that they have great hiking opportunities in
There
in
you go.
Croatia. And so, by playing to everyone's interest, I was able to convince them to go to Croatia. And that ended up being everyone's favorite part of the trip. And whenever people have complaints about a trip that I plan, I also tell them, if you did not plan this and you did not participate when I asked you for your opinion, then your opinion is not welcome now. So
Yeah. You can't complain now. We're here. Yeah. That's
I
good.
definitely had to pull that card a couple
Yep. I'll
times,
bet.
but the
I'll
trip
bet.
went really well and everybody was very happy.
Very cool. Yeah. Croatia's still on my list. I have a friend who's, I think his wife's family has a resort over there or something. And we're thinking about doing some podcast workshop stuff over there. I think it'd be pretty fun.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it'd be pretty
Croatia
cool.
is another one of my favorite countries. I ended up spending after the trip with my friend and my family, I ended up spending another 3-ish weeks there, and
Wow.
it's beautiful, beautiful place.
I hear it's cool. Yeah, the photos I've seen are fantastic. Yeah.
Hmm.
So what advice would you give to aspiring outdoor writers looking to break in?
I think my biggest piece of advice for outdoor writers, travel writers, really any kind of writer, if you're trying to break into the industry is to start with what you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times people get caught up in, how do I, especially when it comes to travel or outdoors, there's lots of cool events and cool
Mm-hmm.
trips and things, and people got to get caught up in that. And I always say, no, start small, start with what you know, start writing about your hometown or your home state or wherever it is that you are located or whatever destination that you feel strongly enough to say that you're an expert in.
Mm-hmm.
Start writing about that first.
That's good advice.
And then the other opportunities will start to roll in. The PR people will find you.
Yeah.
That is their job. And the editors will find you as well. But you have to at least start with what you know. I think that's the biggest thing.
It's probably easier to hone your craft on something you're very familiar with as opposed to making stuff up, because they can tell when you're making it up.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the other thing I would say too is to not be so afraid of editors. I think a lot of times it's easy to feel like there is this big power imbalance between editors and writers.
Mm-hmm.
I know I felt that way, and the fear of pitching stopped me from freelancing for a long time and breaking into the industry in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And once I realized that editors are people and they actually need writers just as much as we need them to say yes to our ideas.
Right.
They also need us to fill the pages of their publications, to fill their websites. And, you might get a lot of no's, but eventually you will also get a yes. And even if you get a no, don't take it personally, because I've had, some editors say no to an idea, and then a different editor at an equally wonderful publication said yes to the same exact idea.
Yeah.
So, there are so many factors that can come into play into whether an editor accepts a pitch or not. I try not to take it personally when I get that no, and keep chugging along.
Yeah, that makes sense, because everybody's pretty busy and you never know what other million things the editor has going on or what caused the no. It doesn't really matter. Just take the no and move on, and you'll get it next time, Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you envision the future of outdoor storytelling and content creation changing?
That's a good question. It's in a world where things change so quickly, especially when it comes to technology and things like that, it's almost hard to envision what the future will look like. But one thing I know for sure, I know a lot of writers are really afraid of how AI will affect our work.
Yeah, I've heard of writers and photographers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think there is a possibility where I could see a world where editors become, let's say, more comfortable, in air quotes, with using AI for simpler stories, right?
Yeah.
Top 5, sweaters to wear at the airport kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Basic stuff.
But basic stuff. But in a way, I think that leaves room for more beautiful storytelling that only humans can really do. There's no way that a computer could write a story about hiking on in the Dolomites and how that affected you, or how what you learned from it. Those kind of stories that play into, that have the travel element, that have the beautiful, nature and outdoors element, but also has universal messages brought into it. I think that's another element. I didn't mention that before, but another beautiful element of great travel writing is when it incorporates those universal messages that, I didn't experience that trip, but maybe I experienced those same feelings that you're describing in a different setting. So I have a feeling that, we might see AI and technology kind of take care of some of those more basic writing. And I'm hoping that will leave room in budgets and editors' hearts for
Yeah.
more for storytelling in its true form.
Yeah. I think the writers are always going to be more authentic, whatever they're writing about.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
AI is pulling from data and things that are
Hmm.
just scripted all over the internet. And there's going to be a little bit of robotics to that, right? It's just going to be a little mundane. Whereas a writer
Absolutely.
that like you, who's crafted your skill and honed your skill and can describe things and paint the picture, there's always going to be room for that, hopefully.
Hmm. Yes, fingers crossed, but
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
that is my prediction.
Yeah, I got you. I'm with you. So, a couple fun questions to wrap up with. Are you a big reader? Do you have any favorite books? What's one of your favorite books to read?
Yeah, I every year I try to read a bit more because when your job is all reading and writing, sometimes it's hard to remember that reading can also be fun and leisure and a
Right.
leisure activity.
Right.
But one of my favorite books is definitely The Alchemist.
Oh, yeah.
And it has a little bit of an outdoorsy element to it now that I think about it.
Yeah.
It certainly inspired me. I haven't done it yet, but I want to go camping in the Sahara Desert one day. I think that would
Oh,
be
cool. That'd be fun.
an incredible experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of my favorite books. Definitely. It's all
All right.
about chasing your destiny and and not being afraid of that. So I think that's
a
my
good one.
top book.
I don't think anybody's mentioned that one. I think you might be the first to mention that. That's a good one.
Highly recommend it.
We'll link to that in the show notes for sure. And if people would like to follow up with you, how can they do that? What's the best way to find you?
On Instagram, my handle is at She Dreams of Travel, which was actually the name of my blog.
Oh, nice.
Back in the day. Yeah.
Uh-huh, yeah.
But I have my website as well, shedreamsoftravel.com. And there's a form through there to contact me via email.
Cool.
Instagram also has a form to contact me via email. So yeah, there's
Cool.
a couple ways to get in touch with me.
Cool. Well, we'll link to that stuff in the show notes. It's been great talking to you. Appreciate you coming
Likewise.
on the show. And I look, maybe our paths will cross on the road somewhere someday. If you ever get over here to the Eastern Sierra, definitely give a holler.
I will, definitely. And if you're in Florida, you let me know.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you'll find show notes with links to everything we talked about and more. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week, and thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Rick Sayes.